that once was part of Dublin in the rare old times. Ah, them times are long gone. My Dublin. My Dublin has been changing now for donkey's years. And even before this pandemic, I barely recognise the Dublin that I grew up in the 60s. And to be honest with you, I think it's about time somebody decided to write down or to talk or to record a little bit of that history that's vanishing before our eyes. And I know people think that when you look back with rose-coloured glasses and everything was great and everything was fantastic. Well, it wasn't. I mean, it was hard and it was tough, but it bred hard and tough men. And I grew up in a block of flats, like 400 flats in Dolphin House. You know, thousands of mad jumflas and thousands of mad jummuns, but hearts as good as gold. And targers caused all sorts of war and trouble. They weren't angels, but it was a different type of childhood. And when I talk to my grandchildren now, I've 4 lovely grandchildren, and when I talk to them now and I tell them about my childhood, they can't get their head around it. They can't. My own daughters can't even get their head around it. They say to me, "Dad, you were born in the bleeding Victorian days," pardon the language. And to be honest with you, it really was like the Victorian days. I remember reading an article in a paper back in the 50s and 60s, and they sent over some MP here to meet a member of government, De Valera's government. He was the president at the time. And he went back and he reported that Dublin, with its slums and its tenements, was more like Victorian London in the 1800s. And you know something? He wasn't far wrong. My dad used to bring me over by the hand when I was about 5 in 1957, thereabouts. And he'd bring me over by the hand, walk. There was no buses and all. Only if you had money, you got the bus, but most times you walked everywhere. And my dad was ex-British Army. He was as Irish as they come, a Republican. But he left this country when he was 8. He was only 17, and he forged his birth certificate to say he was 18. He was born in 1922. But in 1922, the customs house burned down. So the birth certificates for that year were lost. So he forged his birth certificate and said he was 18 when he was only 17. And they sent him off to the Isle of Wight for 6 weeks training with bayonets and rifles. A young fella who was 5'6", my dad. And if he was 9 stone, that's all he ever was throughout his life. I think 9.5 stone was the most he ever got to. But my dad went from the Isle of Wight out to the Sahara, out to North Africa, and spent in the 8th Army with Rommel's army coming to meet him. He grew up on a battlefield, and he came home with 6 medals that he used to pawn to feed us. And he never spoke about it. He didn't want to talk about it. So when he walked fast. He was a brisk walker. But the reason he joined the British Army was there was no work here. So it was either that his mother had starved with the kids because his mother was rearing a family on her own in a tenement house in Chancery Lane. 37 Chancery Lane was where I was born, the back of Dublin Castle. And he walked everywhere. So he joined the army to feed his mother and send her back home the money, the wages from being a soldier, which was pittance, but he sent her home, it was money. And it reared the rest of the family. And so he'd march me over to Summerhill to my Uncle Paddy's and my Auntie Peggy, who had 13 children. He used to say he wanted his own football team, but my dad said he was starting on the supporters. There was kids everywhere. And you had to walk up 13 flights of stairs up to the top of the house where they lived. No knocker on the door. You had to rattle the handle on the door. If you knocked the door, you weren't getting answered because you were a bill collector. You didn't know. So we'd go in and there'd be a cup of tea, all right, and it'd be tea that was made 4 days ago. There wouldn't be a crust of bread. There wouldn't be food. My dad would have a few bob, he'd share it. And if they had a few quid, they'd share it. And we'd sit there and he'd talk and tell them about, what was happening in his life and how he was trying to find work. And it was really, really a tough life. But because it's gone and vanished, I think it's very important that people like myself and yourself and anyone else that wants to comment, I'm going to do a little piece every week, and I'm going to talk about old Dublin. I'm going to talk about what we were like, who we were, how we survived. And I'd love if you would come on and just write your own little story in the comments and tell the rest of the world what it was like in Dublin. Because although Dublin is gone, and to be quite honest with you, I'm delighted that it is, because the poverty was unbelievable, and the children that died of starvation and died of getting knocked down or getting drowned in canals because there were so many you couldn't look after them all, it was important. It's important now to kind of put that into perspective, because that Dublin is gone, as I said. And the Dublin that I see now, I embrace it with wholeheartedness. Miss Ireland is of Afro-Caribbean descent, and I love it, because the way I'm looking at it is she's Dublin, she's Irish, she's reared here. Her parents might come from Afro-Caribbean roots, but she's representing our country. We have Olympic runners from the African continent, and we have Indian families who have grown up here, and they're as much Irish and Dublin as we are, and I welcome them all. And I know people say they dilute our traditions. That's bullshit. I mean, did we dilute the tradition of New York and America and Australia? We have a diaspora, according to Mary Robinson, our ex-president, of 80 million people. That's 80 million Irish people all over the world. Did we dilute all of that world? No, we didn't. We enriched it. If you can't see a cop TV series on, or a film, unless there's a Lieutenant Maguire, or there's Lieutenant Burke, or there's Joe Murphy, who's the head of the CIA. That's what we did. We enriched the nationalities that lived in the Bronx. The Irish and the Italians grew up as rivals, but they brought their own set of skills to that country, and that country has become enriched. Every country that we ever went to is enriched. So when it comes back to us, I think they're enriching our country, and I'm delighted with it, because I can remember going to England when I was a teenager, and I saw signs in the window that said, "No blacks, no Irish, no dogs." That's what I saw when I was only a young fella. And I don't want to see that ever again. And I know that would probably never happen again in England, because it would be regarded as racist. But when you have the likes of Boris Johnson and his compatriots there using the analogy of Smarties, that's what one of them used recently. He said, Northern Ireland, if you had a big jar of Smarties for the UK and UK exports, and you took all of the Smarties out except a handful, that's what he said it amounts to the people in Northern Ireland. Well, I'm a Republican. This is a 32 country. There's no border on this country, and there never was, and there never will be. There's a border on the ocean. That's it. We own that. That's the Irish Sea. After that, you can keep the rest of it. I'm not anti-British. I never was. I have friends in Britain. My uncle still lives over there and he still talks like me. He's a dub. But I will not have the likes of Boris Johnson, who lies every single day in the Houses of Parliament. He gets up there and he tells lie after lie after lie and he gets away with it. And we have their Foreign Secretary now saying that Northern Ireland people are like smarties. No, I won't have that. The people of Northern Ireland are our people as well. And if they choose to be part of the United Kingdom, that's their prerogative. We have to embrace and we have to look forward. We can't look back. We can't be looking at all the troubles and all the rest of it. It's all recorded. It's there forever and hopefully we'll never go back to it. And the same is true of Dublin. I don't want to go back to the Dublin of 1960s. I don't want Dublin to become that. I love my Dublin. I want my Dublin to embrace the world and embrace every nationality. And I was as proud as every other Irishman when Riverdance burst across the scene in the 90s and took the world by storm. Now, in Riverdance, you'd be hard pressed to find an Irish reel on its own. There's a flamenco in it. There's every single dance from God knows which different continent, but it's Irish. We amalgamated it into ours and we made it and it's become part of us. And that's who we are. We are the new age dubs and the new age Irish, but we shouldn't lose our identity and we shouldn't lose the little stories that made us. So maybe I'll end this little broadcast, this little chat I'm having with us about Dublin with a little story of my own. And I won't bore you with the details because it's all in me book. The cheek of me to write a book. Never went to school, no formal education, have dyslexia, didn't know what it was, but I spent a few years on the streets homeless, and one of my buddies out there, his name was Tommy, and he says to me one day, I was 3 years on the streets, he was 25 years on the streets, and he took me under his wing. He was going to look after me. I ended up on the streets. I was a businessman. I had my own shop in Mead Street. I had 8 of my family working for me. But life gives you a boot in the ghoulies and you lose everything and you end up like me, broke, homeless and on the street. 1 minute you're a respected businessman, next minute you're on the street. If you want to know what happened in between, read me book. It's called Miracle Man from Homeless to Hollywood. It's a big title. It's on sale in Veritas. But I'm not the miracle man in it. There's a reason that was called that, and you'll have to read it to find out. So it's in the Connolly Bookshop in Temple Bar. It's in Veritas of Abbey Street. I'm on Facebook. If you want me to send you a copy with me dyslexic signature on it, I will. But thank God for spell check. And thank God for my dad, who was well educated, and he helped his dyslexic son to try to learn how to read. And my mother, who never went to school, couldn't read or write, so I take after her. She helped me with our Dublin wit, and she helped me with her common sense. As she said, she had a saying for everything. She says to me, I don't know why it's called common sense, because not many people have it, so it's not common, and not many people have sense. She said, so I don't know why they call it that, but anyway, it's called common sense. So I think she gave me the benefit of that. My dad gave me the benefit of his stories in North Africa and liberating the camps in Auschwitz and Belsen, and wouldn't talk about it. He just skimmed over it, wouldn't talk about it. At Christmas, he'd shed a few tears over the people that died in both sides, prayed for both sides. And my own little story goes like this. I was on the streets with Tommy for a few years, 3 years. And he says to me one time, what would you have been if you hadn't have found yourself homeless? What would you have been? Says, I would have wrote a book. And he said, a book? What would you write about? So I don't know. Probably me life. Your life? I said, yeah. Right, says he. And why didn't you write it? He said, when you weren't homeless. I said, well, I never went to school and I'm dyslexic and all of that. And he says, do you know what's always bothered me? So what? Says he, well, I can't understand, he said, how some professor or something realised that when someone like you, he says, looks at words and you see them the wrong way around. He decided, I know what I'll do. I'll call this a humongous word like dyslexia, about 14 letters, just to feck up the heads of people like yourself with dyslexia, he says. No, no insult intended. Thanks, says I. Thanks for that. And it's true. Why would somebody who's educated decide to call that word dyslexia? Why wouldn't they call it oxo? And that way, if you mixed it up, it wouldn't matter, because everybody would know what you're talking about. But you see, that's back to me ma talking about common sense. And they haven't got much common sense. So what I'm going to end on is just this little story, and it's a true story. When I was homeless, Tommy died, and I won't go into the details of that because it's painful, but he died anyway on the streets, and I felt kind of lost without him. And I was sitting up at Christchurch, and I didn't know what day it was, what date it was, nothing like that. I knew it was lashing sleet. I'd long beard down to here and long hair down to here. And I'm sitting with a big old coat pulled around me, and I wasn't aware of anyone passing by me. All you see is feet, people's feet. That's all you see. And apparently a girl and her boyfriend passed by, and she came back. I didn't know this at the time, but she came back and she knelt down in front of me, and it was just like an angel coming down from heaven like that. All I saw was these blue eyes looking at me and blonde curly hair, the light shining behind her head. She looked like, to me, an earth angel. And she said to me, how are you? And I said, hello, ma'am. And she said, I'm only 23. Don't be calling me ma'am. And I said, it's just a sign of respect. Right, she said, what's your name? And I said, and she said, you don't know your own name. I said, well, excuse me, when you're on the streets, you don't get called by your name, they call you by your nickname. She said, what did they call you? I said, well, some of them call me Pancho because of brown skin and I had a black moustache and a beard and long hair. And the others, I said, they call me Gigi because my initials are Gannon. I mean, that's my name. And she said, right, okay. So she talked to me for a little while. I said, your boyfriend's getting fed up down there. Feck him, she said, I'm at the buying the drink, we're going to a party. So she went down, she took the bag out and she came back up. She said to me, here, there's a bag of drink. There's 20 cigarettes. She said, I wish you a happy new year. I said, when is the new year? She said, in a few hours' time. It's New Year's Eve. It'll be the new millennium. I said, what's a millennium? She said, it'll be the year 2000. I said, 2000? She said, yeah. I said, jeez, that means I'm 3 years this year on the streets. And she said, listen, she said, why don't you go home? And I started laughing. I said, go home? I haven't got a home. And she said, of course you have a home. I said, listen, love, I don't want to be hanging around where my daughters are living and my ex-wife is living. I said, making a show of them. I said, so I couldn't go home like this. And she said, of course you could. Out there, she said, this 23-year-old making more sense than an old man like me. At the time I was 48. She said, out there, she said, is a family that loves you. And she said, if you go home and you knock the door and you tell them you want another chance, they'll give you another chance. And she kissed me on the cheek, and I was shocked because nobody had even shook me hand in years. And she said, goodbye, happy new year. And she walked away, and I never saw her again. That girl changed my whole life. That girl showed to me the power of words. I got up off that ground and I went up to some friends up at John's Lane Church. I used to stand at John's Lane Church and everybody knew Glenn. I didn't even have to tap up. I didn't have to beg. They just came out of the chapel and said, here, Glenn, there's a few bob. I prayed for you in there. And I say, well, I'm praying for you now because I believe in God. I do believe in God. I believe there's a plan for everyone, even a homeless man like me. And I went out on the 78A bus. I gave me mates the bag of drink because I knew I couldn't go home with drink. And they said, why are you going home? I said, because me daughter had a baby. I said, my young daughter. I said, a few months ago or a few weeks ago, I don't know. Somebody told me on the street. And I'm either going to die on these streets like Tommy, or I'm going to go home and see my grandson grow up. And I see myself grow up and get some sense. So I went home and I knocked the door and they took me in. And I had to go to rehab and spend 9 months in Coolmere in a toy. And I came out and the first thing I did was become a volunteer with Dublin Simon, because I wanted to help other people to get off the street. So the power of that little story is this. You're listening to this now. You have that power. Everybody listening to this has that power. All it takes is a kind heart to say, I'm going to help that person. Doesn't matter how you help them. You don't have to go over. Some people say to me, I wouldn't approach a homeless person because you all have mental health problems. And that's probably true of a lot of us. I had to go through counselling because I had a lot of abuse in my past. I was abused as a child and suffered terrible in Golden Bridge. I was put into Golden Bridge for like forever, seemed like forever. And I couldn't deal with all that. Didn't tell me family about that. No, I mean, me ex-wife and me children never knew I was in anywhere like that. Never knew I suffered any of those things. Because I didn't want to tell them and worry them. But I couldn't keep it in my head, so I needed to go to counselling. So yeah, a lot of us do have a lot of problems. But nothing that a few hours counselling session every week for a few months wouldn't sort out. And I'm living proof of that. But the main thing to remember is this. If you want to help, you can help in many ways. You can go down to GPO and help out to help the volunteers to feed the homeless, because it's a shocking indictment on this government and every other government. And I'm not a member of any political party. But it's a shocking indictment that we have 6,000 homeless in this country, 1,500 families homeless in this country, 5,000 children homeless in this country. A lot more than we had when I was a child. Homelessness was in the hundreds back then. So the government don't have the will. This one, the last one, and for the last 20 years. And I've told them that. I've told them that at every meeting we ever had. That to solve homelessness, you need the will. They haven't got the will. But we have the will. We're Dubs. We're Irish. We look after everyone. We don't care. We don't ask you for a passport. We're just going to help you. Because that's who we are. We have the greatest reputation in the world, per capita, bar none, for helping. That's who we are. We're a generous nation. And we'll always help. And so when people say to me, if I give them money, they'll buy drink. And I say, they used to say to me, will you buy drink if I give you that? And I used to say, I'll buy what I believe will help me. That way, I'm not telling a lie. I was going to buy drink. But that was going to help me because I couldn't get through it. I couldn't get through the cold unless I had a bit of drink. Now, that's self-destructive because when you drink, you open your pores and you can get double pneumonia, you know what I mean? But when you're in a corner and you just have no comfort whatsoever, and somebody might kick you as they're going by because they just feel in a bad mood, that's not everyone. There's a lot of good people out there and a lot of good people helping. And all I'm saying is that you have that power. Take that power and use that power. And let us be known as the race who always help people, always look after each other. Because back in Dublin when we had nothing, we had everything. We looked after each other. We cared for each other. And we'll still do it. And we'll get through this pandemic. You wait and see. We came through wars with Northern Ireland. We came through all of that. We came through, the Vikings tried to come here. The Romans didn't even bother because they were going to get battered. They didn't care. They invaded Britain instead, but they didn't invade us. So we're fighting Irish. We'll fight this pandemic. We'll come out the other side and we'll look after each other. And I think what will happen is people will realise that it's not all about the new car. It's not all about the fancy house. It's not all about how much you have or what you haven't got. It's about each other, looking after each other. And that's what we're going to do. Thanks for listening to me. It was lovely to talk to you. I'd love if you'd write in the comments anything at all that you'd like to add to it. Go easy on me though, I'm not used to this type of thing. So I mightn't be using the right vocabulary, put it that way. But I speak from my heart. So God bless you all. Take care and good luck.